Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of Duval Rundown. Today I'll be joined by Ryan Green, aka Hacker, and Tommy McManus, former Jaguars linebacker, to break down Dolphins versus Jaguars and Jacksonville's disappointing Week 1 loss to Miami. About to try to send the link to Hacker and try to get him in here. And right now I'm just going to try to let people kind of join the show, but feel free to start commenting your instant reactions and start venting about the Jags, and we'll get started here very shortly. The Crane says ETN lost us the game. Bottom line, yeah, it's hard to kind of disagree with that. The Jaguars were up 17-7 in the third quarter with a chance to go up multiple. They were already up multiple scores, and they could have gone up more multiple scores. But then ETN fumbled right at the 1 yard line, gave the ball back to Miami. A play later, Tyreek Hill goes 80 yards for a touchdown to make it just a 3-point game at that point. So, yeah, as Crane said, would have been up 24-7. Damon Jameson says, "Urgh." Hopefully Hacker will be joining us momentarily. And then I was going to have Tommy McManus join us after Hacker is in here with us, but maybe we'll just do both of them at the same time. We'll see what happens. Just going to wait about one more minute before I really start diving in. So appreciate everyone's patience. No more comments? I thought you guys would be more upset. Here's Hacker. All right, let's get the show started. Hack, can you hear me? Are you there?
Hey, Gus, how you doing?
Hey, Hack. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Man, what a finish there in Miami. Good grief.
Goodness gracious, man! It was definitely a tale of two halves there, wasn't it? Between the first half, definitely the vibes were way up there, up 17-7 after 2 quarters, and then it all fell apart. Jacksonville Jaguars didn't score again in the second half, just kind of allowed a second half Miami comeback, and then Jason Sanders just knocked through the 53 yarder as time expired to get Miami the home win to start the season. So, Hack, just what's your immediate reaction, like immediate takeaway? Does anything necessarily stand out, or is it just kind of another disappointing Jaguars loss?
I mean, it's certainly disappointing. This one's going to sting the fan base because they had it won. I mean, if ETN doesn't fumble, the game's over. And literally in the blink of an eye, you got the fumble, the 80-yard Tyreek Hill touchdown. And from that point forward, Miami was clearly the better team. Now, we're going to talk about the ETN fumble, and that'll be the big topic of conversation.
For sure.
The Jaguar offense was horrible after that play. They were horrible. Offensive line couldn't block anybody. They couldn't run the ball. They basically did nothing. I thought the defense played their tails off. But again, when your offense is doing nothing, Christian Kirk, some drops. But again, ETN fumble aside, and that's the big topic, that offensive line, you and I talked about this. A lot of people have talked about that O-line. That was bad in the fourth quarter.
Real. The Cranes commented on YouTube, lucky for a missed field goal. You're definitely right. Sanders missed, I think it was like a 37-yarder. It definitely should have gone in. He missed it very wide left. But how do we go for it in our own side of the field like that? What do you think about that, Hacker, the Jaguars' decision to go for it on fourth down, which was the Travis Etienne run where he started going wide left and then ran all the way across the other side of the field?
Yeah, I think that was trying to get the momentum back. I mean, they've talked all offseason. This is now the second offseason in a row. They've talked about the short yardage improving. It didn't look that much better than some of the things we saw last year and the year prior. I think it was a little bit of a panic move. You're trying to get the momentum back. Obviously, it didn't work. Thankfully, the missed field goal, so Doug Peterson kind of gets bailed out there. But again, I got grave concerns about the offensive line after what I saw today. Because keep in mind, Bradley Chubb wasn't even out there, right? That was Jalen Phillips on a snap count. That was Calais Campbell, who's 38 years old. I mean,
right.
You got Myles Garrett next week. I mean, I got concerns on what I saw from the O-line today.
Yeah, the O-line was a little bit they were making some movement at first, especially when Tank Bigsby was getting the ball, and they were actually creating a lot more push, a lot more space for ball carriers to run than I was expecting in the first half. But it felt like in the second half, just everything kind of went to waste and went against the Jaguars' way, including their run blocking up front. So, Hack, did you see like any kind of difference in play calling from the first and second half? Just because I don't want to stir the Press Taylor pot too much, but I know that in 2022, Press Taylor was calling the second half of a lot of games. And so Doug Peterson has not given anything away in press conferences before the season start in terms of who will be calling plays this year. But I almost wonder if Doug was calling plays in the first half and then Press in the second half, just based on the way that the game went and the way that the 2022 season went as well.
I would certainly hope that's not the case. And if it is, they better not admit that. Because if that is the case, that's going to be a big, big problem. Yeah, I mean, we're Ryan Thomas and Gabe Davis in the second half. They were getting a lot done, I guess, at least midway through the third quarter. But the last, 25 minutes of the game, where was BTJ? Where was Gabe Davis? Again, Kirk had 2 critical drops. Ingram, last time I checked, had 114 catches last year, right? I don't know what on earth happened there with Evan Ingram today. A lot of questions about the offense. They were so good in half number 1. And look, I get it, adjustments made, and give Miami credit. But yeah, the adjustments didn't seem to be made very well on the Jaguar side because it was a completely different offense after that Etienne fumble. And look, I mean, you lose 5 out of 6 last year. In season history for the Jaguars. You had some experience dealing with adversity, I think. You talk the entire offseason about how it still eats at you day in and day out. And you let one slip through your fingers like opening day, man, this is it's going to be a really big deal in December or January when you talk about tie breaks and things along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's been multiple Jaguars coaches and players who kind of mentioned in the past week just how important it was to start out 1-0, partly because that's kind of like the team mantras. They wanted to go 1-0 every week, but also, as you were just saying, like the fact that this is an AFC opponent and a team that's likely going to be competing for a playoff team in December and January. That's definitely a very big deal, even if it is only the first week. Mark Moon asked if the Jaguars on SI podcast is still ongoing. I'll just respond to that real quick. I'm hoping that it's a see you later and not a goodbye, but yeah, we've had to pause that momentarily, and so hopefully it'll come back at some point. But you can check us out here on Duval Rundown on 1010 channels or forever. But hopefully the Jaguars on SI podcast will come back with Chipley and I. Robert says, you can tell who called the plays. I thought it was funny. The very first play call was just the play action on the first snap for the Jaguars. They got the ball second to start the first half, but it was their first play on offense, and it was a play action. And Calais Campbell, the previous mayor of Jacksonville, brought down Trevor Lawrence for like an 8 or 9 yard loss. And so I think you mentioned it with the running game and the run protection or the run blocking, but I think the pass blocking as well was definitely a concern, especially with, like you said, the Cleveland Browns on deck for next week.
Yeah, I was very surprised, Gus. Anton Harrison, I thought, had to stay at the office today, and I thought he was maybe the best offensive lineman the Jaguars had coming into the year. It was not a good day for Anton Harrison. Mitch Moore, my certain moniker when it comes to offensive linemen, if I don't notice you, that probably means you're doing a good job, because the only time you notice linemen is if they're committing penalties or getting beat for sacks. Truthfully, I didn't notice as Cleveland all that much. I didn't notice Brandon Scherer for Mitch Morse all that much. I noticed the 2 tackles, and I would have thought the 2 tackles were the strength of the team coming into today. That was not the case. Cam did not have a good day. Anton really didn't have a good day. I got some concerns as well, just talking about other things really quick. Another soft tissue injury for Tyson Campbell. And when he comes off to the sideline, he did not look good, from a body language standpoint. He had the hamstring last year. That's a concern. Miami went after Monteric Brown once Campbell left the game. I don't fault the defense for this. I thought the defense played well enough to win. The defense played tail off. But again, you have a lot of experience after Campbell and Darby, and if Campbell's going to miss extended period of time with a hamstring, that is something that's concerning to me as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, similar to how you were saying You don't really notice offensive linemen unless it's a bad play. It's kind of similar for cornerbacks and just the defensive backfield where it's hard to kind of notice when they have really good reps, especially when they just aren't being targeted. But then when they are targeted and they are allowing big plays, it's a lot noticeable or more noticeable. And so Tyson Campbell ended up leaving the game after kind of re-aggravating a hamstring injury or just having a hamstring injury through the third or fourth quarter. So Monteric Brown came in his place. And then it seemed like Antonio Johnson had a little bit of an up and down game. What did you see from Antonio Johnson today? And what might have been his first career start, but definitely one of his first starts for the second-year pro.
He just needs to slow down, man. He was in position. He just missed tackles. I mean, I don't generally have a problem when guys are there and they miss tackles, but when it happens so frequently and is so noticeable, I mean, I like the fact that he's in position, but you got to make those plays. I mean, you add up football's that game of inches, right? We talk about that Thursday night. Isaiah Likely was out of bounds by an inch, maybe. And you add up all those inches, those things matter at the end. And when Achane catches the ball in the flat, you miss a tackle and a 3-yard gain becomes a 5-yard gain. Well, you add a couple of those up, and all of a sudden that's 2 yards, 4 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards. They're in field goal position. So, yeah, I mean, Antonio Johnson, to me, also had a tough day at the office as well. It's going to, guys like Hayes, Cisco, Savage. It's hard for me to criticize the defense too much. Again, you go into Miami on opening day, you only allow 20 points. That's a pretty good day for the Jaguar defense. So I don't want to be too critical of them. But I did think Antonio Johnson, of all the guys on defense, his missed tackles were very noticeable to me.
For sure. All right, we've got Tommy McManus in here waiting. Let's see if I can add him. Here we go. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Gus, how you doing, Hank? Afternoon.
Tommy, how are you?
Tom,
I'm all right. Ahead. Look, it's a tale of two halves, or at least 2.5 to 1.5 quarters. It's like, I don't know what happened. You're talking about, the passes out to the flat. What are you doing? How about the offset fullback, short yardage? I don't know. Gave it to him before. Maybe they'll give it to him again. I mean, just little things that, that cost you games. I mean, think about it. I mean, Holland knocks the ball out next play. I mean, it's just a total. If you don't know what momentum is, that's momentum. Mm-hmm. That was a huge momentum swing. It's tough to come back from that on the road. The second half just wasn't as good. The offensive line wasn't as good. The defensive line wasn't as good. They did start running the ball a little bit better against us in that late third quarter, early fourth, just not good enough. But I agree with you. I mean, 2017, you got to keep it in perspective. It's game one. It is in the AFC, so you better hope that doesn't come back to bite you, if it comes down to that, tiebreaker after the division.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not that upset. I thought Trevor played great for the most part. Now, when he starts getting pressure, he throws the ball off that back foot, and it's not as accurate. He had Kirk on the side there. I mean, he may have gotten to it, but it just – you see the pressure coming. He throws off that back foot. It sails on him a little bit. But overall, I thought he played great. I don't know where Ingram was all day, why we didn't call his number.
Yeah.
ETN, I thought the running backs, Tank played great. Tank had a good day. ETN, I don't know. Look, they're pro athletes too, man. Holland, I mean, it was just a perfect punch right to the ball that knocked that thing out. So a damn shame it happened because that swung the game heavily in the Dolphins' favor.
Yeah, that was just perfect Peanut Tillman for him, wasn't it? That was a great punch out by Devon Holland. He had a couple of big plays. He also had the pass breakup against Evan Engram at some point in the first half. But, it was a little surprising. I think Engram had about 2 or 3 targets. And the good news is that Brian Thomas obviously looked really good, especially in the first half. And so it was nice to see that. And then Gabe Davis was kind of getting involved in a lot of the ways I was kind of expecting him to, just more so over the middle as opposed to just like a decoy deep threat. And so was there any other positive takeaways that either of you guys had from this game, even if it was a disappointing result?
I mean, I think Trayvon had a nice day today. He was pretty active. The missed tackles are concerning. I mean, they set up that outside play a lot. You'd think he'd finally catch on and maybe, I don't know, anticipate a little bit more. I mean, look, Campbell, gosh, it's such a damn shame. I mean, I'm sure nobody wants him hurt. He doesn't want to be hurt, but that's why I was wondering why you'd pay him without knowing he was fully healthy, man. And that could be a lingering thing. And then, of course, Brown come off the bench. He's doing his best. I mean, it's tough, coming right off and they go right at you,
Mhm.
But think about it. I mean, Tyreek Hill didn't do anything for 2 quarters. I mean, they were really taking care of him. And then it's that one play and then another, and then Waddle wakes up and, they wake up. And
Yeah, it happens quick, doesn't it? I think Ronald Darby gets a lot of credit for kind of containing Tyreek Hill in the first half. He also had a lot of success against Hill last year when he was part of the Baltimore Ravens in that game, even though it was almost a similar story where Miami just kind of came out in the second half, guns a-blazing, was able to throw their way and just score their way to a second half victory. And so, yeah, Hacker, anything else? I mean, Tank Bigsby looks pretty solid, right?
All about Tank Bigsby was terrific in the first half. Really ran the ball hard. It's so unfortunate because there were so many positive things. Brian Thomas Jr., that throw Trevor Lawrence made to Brian Thomas on that touchdown, that was an incredible throw. I thought Gabe
career.
Right, great throw. I thought Gabe Davis 60 yards receiving in his Jaguar debut. Trayvon Walker was impactful. Eric Armstead impactful. I mean, they made enough plays. Enough guys did enough things to win the game. My problem is the O-line and the ETN fumble, and I get it. Holland made a play. The problem, guys, is this is not the first time that's happened with ETN. This is Groundhog Day. That's happened in the red zone before, and it's like, man, we spent so much time talking about Bigsby's fumbling problems last year. You forget we were doing the same thing with Travis Etienne in 2022, and to have that rear its ugly head again on opening day in 24, to me, is just very unfortunate, but also kind of concerning at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to hold on to the ball. That's number one, no matter what position you're playing. It's unfortunate. It really affected the game. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you're putting them away maybe at 23-7. At least you got a good shot at keeping them at bay for a while. And they get right back into it. Look, they faded a little bit at the end. I don't know. Maybe they got tired. Maybe it was, it was really hot. Maybe just, that's the things don't go your way. You miss a few tackles. You look at Cam. I mean, Cam Robinson. I mean, it's always those inopportune times, the worst times when he gets beat. And he gets beat at the worst times today when we really need him to hold up for whatever reason, So, look, again, you lose by 3 on the road. You got some work to do. There's no doubt about that. Only scoring 17 after you had 14. I mean, you were looking good early, man. Those long drives were fantastic. I mean, that 96-yard drive was a thing of beauty. I mean, we got the PI, but so what? It was still all of it. Great balance, great production, great runs by Tank, great throws and catches. You had it going on, and then it just kind of went away. I don't know. I don't want to say it was play calling. It's kind of weird. They turned it on, and you couldn't turn it back on against them.
I was talking to Hack about the play calling right before you joined, and maybe, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell really since the Jags aren't giving us a lot of information about who's calling plays and when, and if it is switching up at all. But I think you do have a good point about the team just getting tired. I mean, I know that the Jags should be used to the Florida heat, even playing in a little bit further south in Miami, but it really seemed like their energy level was just really different from the first half to the second half. It seemed like they came out firing in the first half and just kind of lost momentum or lost the fire or whatever. I'm not really sure. But Robert Lamison here commented, if Cam struggles, would you play Walker Little in his place at left tackle? What do you guys think? Let's start with Hacker.
Well, I mean, I thought Cam struggled today, but again, I thought Anton Harrison was the bigger problem.
He struggled too.
Yeah, Anton was not good today, and I'm a big Anton Harrison fan. No, I would not replace Cam Robinson with Walker Little. I chop it up to a bad day at the office, I suppose. But again, like we talked about, that's 38-year-old Calais Campbell and Jalen Phillips coming off an Achilles. Oh, by the way, here comes Myles Garrett on Sunday. And after you see Myles Garrett, you got Buffalo on Monday night with that crowd, and then you get Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson with Houston. So they better figure it out pretty quick. These first 4 games are brutal. I think, it sucks tonight. I'm about to head out to do the 5th quarter. We're going to have that on 1010XL and 92.5 FM beginning roughly at about 6 o'clock. So that'll be good. My kid, Red Zone channel here. That's nice. So we're going to figure all the stuff out right now. I said 2-2 in the first 4. 2-2 in the first 4. Now you got to win 2 out of 3 to get the 2-2. That's why losing today sucks, because you had it won if ETN converts that touchdown. So you got to find a way to beat Cleveland, and then you got to find a way to split on the road at Buffalo, at Houston. It sucks now. It's going to suck tomorrow. I think Wednesday, when you take a deep breath, you'll realize, all right, there was enough positive that happened to say, let's get back to work. Home opener. We're going to be the favorites more than likely against Cleveland. Let's go. If you lose to Cleveland, knowing you got 2 straight on the road, then it might be time to really have some grave conversations.
For sure. All right, Hacker, I know you got to get going to that 4th quarter. For everyone, it starts at 6 p.m. Is that right? You, Coach Leon, or Coach Campo and Leon, just tell the people all about it and where they can hear you guys talk about Jaguars postgame.
Yeah, the head coach, Dave Campo, the Pro Bowler, Leon Searcy, and myself will have the 5th quarter for you on 1010XL, 92.5 FM. We'll start immediately after Jaguars Network. The game ended at about 4:05, so we should be on roughly 6:05, 6:10 this evening. We'll go up until 8 o'clock. We'll take your calls, get your reaction, and we'll let the head coach, and I know the head coach is going to vent because he's been texting me all afternoon. So he's going to vent. So that'll be worthless.
He's a great venter.
I'm going to ask Leon about Anton Harrison and Cam Robinson. I'm sure he's going to vent as well. It'll be a nice venting session for Jaguar fans. I'm heading to the station now, and I'll talk to you guys in a couple hours.
All right. Appreciate you joining us, Hack. I think you're planning on joining us post-game for every game, but thanks again for being here, and I'll be looking forward to the 5th quarter later on. Have a good show.
Talk to you guys next week.
All right, Hack. Yeah, I wouldn't replace Cam either. And Walker's not any better, in my opinion, so –
yeah.
You roll with Cam, it's just, again, I mean, I don't know. I'm going to look at the tape again, probably in the morning, just relook at it. But my initial is, okay, not the outcome you wanted. You had every chance to win that game. You could have won that game. I don't want to say should have, because Miami fought their ass off, and they made the plays when, and you didn't. So you got to give them credit there.
Right.
But overall, I mean, you look what, Waddle and Hill, they had big days, but it was really in about a quarter and a half of work. You know what I mean? It felt like it anyway. I know they had a couple plays here and there, but that first half, we were in good control. They made some adjustments. I will say that the 4th down call on your own 30, I don't like at all, and I hate the call. Like, what are you doing?
Absolutely.
You don't go sideline to sideline on short yardage. You go straight forward. You pick a spot where you're going to go, and you go. Whether that's a QB sneak or a fullback lead or a fullback dive that they did a couple times against us. So I don't know what kind of call that was. That was pretty bad in my opinion.
Yeah,
and go for it. I think you kind of panicked on that one. You didn't have to go for it. Your punter was on fire. He would have pinned him back. Your defense overall at that point was playing fairly well, and they did their job. Of course they got 3 and out, so that was good. But just an unfortunate thing with ETN, and then all that momentum swung, and it felt like they weren't going to recover.
Yeah, a lot of analytics people will kind of tell you that momentum isn't real, which is mostly just because they can't prove it with numbers, which is kind of the basis of science almost. But I mean, you're a former professional athlete. Even I'm a very amateur athlete, but I think anyone who's played a sport at even somewhat of a high level and kind of like understands the way the game flows, knows that momentum is very much real, even if you can't quantify it. And so that was definitely a big kind of
You
reason.
can quantify it if you're in the middle of it and you feel what it is against you. It's a very helpless feeling. It's like, oh, how in the hell how do I stop this? Because there is no quantitative answer. It's not like, well, you just, this and this. No, you got to, someone's got to make a play. But at the same time, man, it's a helpless feeling. Like you can't stop anything. It's like, it's just, they get the momentum and they had the big plays right after that. And obviously that, that was the outcome of the game and helped Miami get back into it. I'll tell you what, I didn't think the kicker was going to make it at the end after that tank he had. Holy cow. Like,
the one that was wide left was ridiculous, huh?
Man, that was insane. But McDaniel, a lot of faith in that young guy, and he kept with it. So, look, I think you saw two very similar teams. They're both going to be vying for their division. They may not win it, but they should be in the wild card. And maybe they'll meet again, in the postseason. I would really like to get this one. I believe in momentum not just during a game, but during the year. The good thing is about this game, even though you didn't win, you could sit there and say, okay, not the outcome, but they didn't blow us out. Hill didn't go for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards, or Rowell didn't do half of that. We controlled their running game for the most part. A lot of the running game was those swing passes. They use those a lot. I think that's like an extension of the run game. They got a few yards on us in that second half that I would have liked back, but overall it wasn't, too damaging. So, you made some plays on offense. Got to tighten some things up on offense, of course. And I don't know. I thought you were pretty close to winning that game. Could have gone either way, and could have been 2017 Jags, and our demeanor's totally different,
Right. Yeah, because my next question for you was just how do you feel about the team going forward? Like, are you in straight panic mode, or is it kind of, even though it's a disappointing day, it sounds like you're still kind of on the same boat and feeling
it's way too early. I mean, think about this. If they would have got blown out, then you'd be like, oh man, now I gotta what's going on? You don't get blown out by a team that you're pretty, close and, competition, talent, everything wise for the most part. But they didn't. They had every chance to win that game, and they could have won that game. Play here or there. So no, I feel it now. Now it's how do you respond, right? Like Hack said, you don't want to go 0-2, especially in the AFC. Now you got another AFC opponent. I know it's not a division, but again, those tiebreakers, they come in handy when you need them, And after the division, they go to the conference, and what are the common opponents? So. I want to see them bounce back in front of the home crowd. I do think a lot of times, first game, you don't know what to expect. I do think even as professional athletes, we play up to competition because we want to prove ourselves. So, yeah, Cleveland's going to be better on that front, but, you up your game because you're a pro and that's what you do. And, you do your best. So, it should be a good, let's see how they respond, Gus. You know what I mean? That's even if they won, I'd be saying the same thing. Like, they didn't come out, so it's a tight game. They could have won too. I'm glad we won, but we got some things to tighten up. And now we got to, how do we respond in week 2 against Cleveland at home? That's going to be, and remember, I said in the pregame this morning, and they deserve every critique that they're going to get because they're big boys and they deserve it. But let's just remember, last 2 years, they ended up the same, 9-8. 1 year they started off bad and then turned it on and finished incredible. Next year they started off really good and then crapped down their leg and finished crappy. But they were both 9-8, right? So my point is, you just don't know how this team's going to do as we go on. Disappointing loss. Learn from it. Make sure you clean some things up, including tackling, and then let's roll on to the Cleveland Browns as we take them for our home opener.
Yeah, I think you said it really well where win or loss, like they kind of had to respond in terms of just fixing kind of like the mental mistakes. And like it felt like the synopsis of the game is just same old Jags kind of shooting themselves in the foot. But again, win or loss, that was kind of the way that at least the second half went. And so
Yeah,
it's
like
not time to panic yet. But if they continue to uh, let the other team win as opposed to, I don't know, winning themselves, yeah, it's not going to be a good sign.
yeah, like just little things like that. Who was that? Was that to Waddle? I think it was to Waddle. They did a nice high low from. It's one of the hardest things to see and do. So when they high low you on the same side, it's easier to see and defend. When they do it on one on each side, like they did, they brought up the outside guy in the left, and he did about a 15-yard dig, and then Waddle came all the way across and was open. And the safety who's on the left side sees the guy go in, he jumps it, not seeing the crosser, and then he's wide open for the most part. Little things like that. That's tunnel vision. I think that was Johnson, right? If I remember correctly. You just got to see the whole field, and you see that guy go in, but you got to see the guy that's out of your peripheral that he's coming to. So don't jump because they want you to jump. And as a player, you want to jump because you're thinking, oh, he's going to throw it in front of me, and I'm going to get a big hit or a pick or knock the ball out of something, and then they throw it behind you, and you look really dumb. So you got to be careful with that. But stuff like that, they got to clean up on defense for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a tough play for Johnson just because, as you were saying, like the guy that was coming in front of him, I'm not sure who it was, but he was wide open. So I don't necessarily blame Johnson for going and getting that covered, but then he lets Waddle run behind him, and then it's certainly not so.
I don't think he saw Waddle till it was too late. He didn't see him coming from the other side, and it's tough. It's tough to see that, but that's your job, and you got to see it.
All right, my last official question for you is just as a former linebacker, did you see anything good or bad out of the group from between Foye to Devin to Ventrell Miller? Seemed like he was playing a lot of snaps. Chad Muma was playing too. Just what do you see out of that unit today?
I mean, Foye had 30 tackles today. The guy was incredible. So he was really good. Lloyd did some good things. Muma wasn't out there a lot, I noticed. He was out there on special teams. Saw him a little bit in the fourth quarter come on.
Okay.
I did see, but he had some snaps. I'm not saying he didn't, but I thought he would have been out there a little bit more. But right. Miller was out there. He made a couple things happen. But the star of the day in that group was number 23, man. I wouldn't take him off the field. I mean, I would never take him off the field. He knows exactly where that ball's going, and he makes sure they go down. So I think Foye had a tremendous day today.
Absolutely. All right, Tom, I'll get you out of here. You got anything else to add or to plug before you leave?
No, Jay. I'll be catching up with Tommy Mac tomorrow and Friday. A new time tomorrow, starting at 12 noon. We'll break down the game. And then on Friday, we'll look forward to the Cleveland Browns coming home opener, man. Should be a rocking time down at the stadium. And, they'll bounce back. 1-1, baby. 1-1 after 2, and we're going to be A-okay. So I think you'll take some positive silver linings out of this one and learn from it. And don't make any excuses for it, and then just go correct them and make yourself better in week 2. And I think they can do it. Absolutely.
All right, that's Tommy McManus, everyone. Make sure to catch his podcast, the Catching Up with Tommy Mac podcast on 1010XL channels. Yeah. Tom, thanks so much for joining us.
All right, Gus, have a good one, man.
You too, man.
All right.
All right, well, let me just go through some comments, see what you guys are thinking. A lot of talk about Trevor. It's honestly hard to just say how good of a performance he had when we can't really see the full field on the broadcast channel or on the broadcast view, because obviously you can't really see the full routes that receivers are running downfield. And then not only like the corners and the safeties, how they're playing the routes or how well they're playing the routes, but also just what type of different shells and coverages they're using against those routes. And so certainly seemed like Trevor didn't really have enough time in the fourth quarter to find players downfield. He did have the back-to-back sacks on what was, I think, the Jaguars' last offensive drive. But he was putting up some incredible first-half numbers. As we mentioned earlier, that touchdown to Brian Thomas Jr., I can't think of a better throw in his career off the top of my head. It was like one of those throws that you create the throw, it certainly didn't look open from any person's point of view, even if you're Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, but he just kind of lofted it in there over defenders. And so it was nice to see, obviously, Brian Thomas, too, scoring his first touchdown and kind of getting involved a little bit more than at least I was expecting earlier. I thought even if he was effective as a field stretcher, he might not have been super productive right off the get-go. But I thought he had a pretty nice game. But I guess, obviously, it was a little bit disappointing for both him and Gabe Davis to disappear a little bit in the second half. People are arguing about Minshew and Trevor in the comments. Just I'm not going to even engage with that. Duval TV is probably our most frequent commenter. Appreciate you, man or woman, or them or they. But they're pissed. Jaguars had a chance to go down and kick a field goal with a kicker they can boot at 60 yards, and we couldn't pick up a first down. Yeah, it was pretty brutal for the offensive display in the second half for the Jaguars. So frustrating to see us go out and fold on a 3-and-out. There was definitely a lot of 3-and-outs and even some maybe 1 or 2 4th-and-outs for the Jaguars. And so, yeah, I think I was a little bit underwhelmed by their offense and that they weren't able to get as many first downs as I expected. Like, it's one thing to get into the red zone and then for something to happen like a Travis Etienne fumble, which is obviously brutal, but it's a little bit of a random event. But for the Jaguars to only have gotten into the red zone a small handful of times certainly isn't great. By the way, Antonio Johnson has not been good. Try to stay as positive as I can when talking about Jags players, but I can't say I necessarily disagree. He had certainly multiple different missed tackles during the game. He had the coverage bust that Tom and I were just talking about when Jalen Waddle had the really long play in the first half. And so, yeah, I mean, again, it might have been his first career start. I should double check that, but he's a second-year pro and was a 5th-round rookie last year. And so hopefully if he gets a little bit more time, he'll start to put it together a little bit more. Devin Lloyd played terrible. Wasn't really paying a lot of attention to Devin Lloyd, so we'll see what the tape says. But I guess he didn't really stand out necessarily either. Reedy says the O-line is unstable. One play it's decent protection, and next it is trash. Yeah, I don't just really disagree with that either. I think for as much play action as the Jaguars ran today, and they ran a ton of play action, which is kind of a change from last season, you would have expected to see some more cleaner pockets, a little bit more time to throw from Trevor. And so, yeah, I guess hats off to the Dolphins defense for playing good play action defense, but it seems a little bit more like a negative for the Jaguars that they just weren't as efficient as they probably could have, should have, would have been using play action. Jester5643 said, they paid Trevor all that money to throw for 165 yards and 1 touchdown, LOL. He's always been overhyped, and now he's overpaid. We'll see what the film says. Again, it's hard to really say or put a lot of just whatever to say a quarterback's performance is really good or really bad without having seen the all-22 and being able to see actually what each play call was, what the defense did on each play, and like where Trevor was making mistakes. Because like my whole thing is that, yeah, 165 yards and 1 touchdown is certainly a disappointing stat line, but like what decision would you have would you have wanted Trevor to make differently? Like Christian Kirk had 2 huge drops. There was obviously a few like sacks where Trevor didn't have a lot of time, a few run plays where it just got stuffed. Like there wasn't really any plays where you were like, oh, that guy was wide open and Trevor just missed him. So without really us seeing anything like that, it's hard for me to be disappointed by Trevor's performance, even if, again, his stat line wasn't great. Duval TV is tired of sticking up for Trevor, and he agrees. I mean, I'm just trying to be as process-oriented as I can, even though we are talking about a Jaguars loss immediately after it happened. But, yeah, I can't really defend the fact that Trevor had multiple opportunities at the end of the game to get at least some points on the board, and then they were just scoreless in the second half. And so even if Trevor was kind of doesn't deserve blame for that, it's definitely not a good look either. Let's see if we've got anything else. Kevin Riley said the team is weak-minded and folds at the first sign of adversity. This happened last year too. I will say that I feel like it happened more so for the defense than the offense, where like similar to this game, I felt like the defense had a lot of juice in the beginning and then they just kind of fell off and lost motivation or whatever it was in the second half. And as we were talking with Tommy and Hacker earlier, maybe a little bit of that was the heat, even if the Jaguars should be used to the heat playing in Northeast Florida. So I think weak-minded is a bit strong, but folding at the first sign of adversity, that's another thing I can't really disagree with. Press Taylor still sucks from Adam. Man, I don't want to say, it's hard to say for every single comment, but it's hard to say that Press Taylor still sucks when we don't know for sure who is calling play calls. And so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt for this one, Adam, because the second half certainly did not look good. And even during the Jaguars' touchdown drives, they did have their first scoring drive was only 6 plays and I think 96 yards or something crazy like that. It was set up by 2 long take runs and then a pass interference drawn in the end zone by Brian Thomas Jr. against Jalen Ramsey. But yeah, there wasn't really a ton of consistency from the Jaguars offense, even when they were able to put some points on the board. Jags choke again, fins up from Michael Burnett. All right. Lloyd was terrible in run. I believe you. The right tackle was a swinging door. Yeah, I was certainly disappointed by Anton Harrison. I thought he was going to be kind of a breakout player this year for the Jaguars, and I was impressed by him last year because I feel like coming out of Oklahoma, he was known more so as being like a nimble, athletic left tackle who's really, really good with his feet. It was probably more so better against kind of finesse type pass rushers than power pass rushers. But then during the season, he actually held his own really well against power rushers. And so I thought that was a great sign for him in pass protection. But then he was a little bit all over the place in this game was Anton Harrison. And so, yeah, it was, I think Tommy was saying it earlier, it was a little bit surprising too that it felt like even though the Jaguars' strength for their offensive line is probably their offensive tackles, especially considering that the depth that they have there, it felt like the interior actually played better. But I guess it also has to do with how Miami's roster is structured because with Jalen Phillips and Calais Campbell on the edge, even if they're not as good as they possibly can be at some point in their careers due to injuries and age or whatever, the Miami interior defensive line is one of the weaknesses of the team. So maybe we shouldn't have been all that surprised that Jacksonville's interior held up for the most part this game. Adam says, in the end, Jag's going to jag. Yeah, my former boss, Alfie Crow, would say the Jags are bad until they're not. So it is fair. Michael Burnett, in typical Jags fashion, they never made halftime adjustments. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree because, again, it's hard to know what the adjustments were or weren't without having watched all 22 film yet. But just going based off of the fact that the Dolphins outscored and shut out the Jaguars in the second half, I think it's pretty fair to say that the halftime adjustments from the Jaguars were pedestrian, to put it nicely, but just not nearly as good as they should have been. And so, yeah, it's hard to tell exactly what happened after halftime, but certainly didn't seem like there was a lot of good adjustments being made either. Kevin Riley's sticking up for Trevor. Not on Trevor. He was good. The O-line sucked and men dropped balls in their hands. Okay. Reedy says Kirk needs to be better. Yeah, disappointing day. I also thought that Parker Washington played a lot more snaps than I was expecting. I kind of thought that Parker, even though he definitely had maybe one of the best off seasons by any Jaguar, I still thought that he was really only going to see playing time if an injury happened in front of him to one of Jacksonville's 3 starting receivers, and Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Brian Thomas Jr. But yeah, even if he's still recovering a little bit from the offseason calf injury that I had, I'm sure he's 100% from the injury that he had in week 13 against the Bengals last year. But not even the 2 drops. The 2 drops are obviously pretty brutal. But other than that one deep completion down the middle, Kirk was kind of a non-factor in this game, and I was surprised by that because I thought even if there's going to be some games where Engram or Thomas Jr. or Davis ends up leading the team in receiving, I thought for sure that Christian Kirk was going to be the number 1 guy in Jacksonville, this season. And so, yeah, not a great week 1 for Christian Kirk. Ian Keller said that Little kicker looked good. That's true. Cam Little knocked I think it was like a 53-yarder at the end of the first half, and then he made his extra points. And so, hey, at least that's one good thing that's carrying over from the offseason or the preseason is that 6th-round rookie Cam Little was looking really good, and that's continued so far. So that's one positive. Adam says, feels like we are back in the Mike Mularkey era. Truthfully, I'm too young for that. Chris Default says, we'll go 3-5 and make a quarterback change, then go 6-3 second half, end up 9-8 again, no playoffs. I will tell you, the Jaguars are never going to make a quarterback change, or at least not this season, unless they are forced to because of injury. If you are out here thinking like, oh, it's Mac Jones time, then I'm sorry, but I don't know. I don't know what a nice thing to say, so I'm just going to keep moving. But the Trevor Lawrence will not be benched. The only reason he's not going to play is because of injury. Ian's back. Any advice for this sad Sunday? Go get some candy. Drown yourself in candy because that's a PG-13 version. Mark Thomas said $275 million quarterback has to make a play in crunch time. Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier, where I'm not going to blame Trevor right away without seeing the film, without having known what the receivers were doing downfield and what the defense was doing downfield to defend them. But yeah, I think it's fair to be disappointed that the face of the franchise had multiple opportunities in the fourth quarter and didn't score any points. I think that's understandable. Duval TV said, this is like a therapy session. That's what I'm trying to do. This is called, if you tune into the Tuesday and Thursday version of this show on 1010XL channels, I've got a little thing this way, like a little Sports Center type panel. And one of the segments that we have for the Tuesday and Thursday show is chat therapy, where we basically just do this. And so hopefully you guys are enjoying it, even if the game was sucky. Nick said, most frustrating part of this loss is the Jags beat themselves. I agree with you there, Nick. Even though, like, I feel like Tyreek and Jalen are kind of inevitable just because of their speed and the way that they're schemed up by Mike McDaniel. 20 points is certainly not bad of a performance for the Jaguars defense. And then the offense had a couple of nice moments, but it felt like more bad moments. And so, yeah, I think fair to say the Jags beat themselves. Kevin said, when Travis fumbled, you could see the team emotion just go flat and say, here we go again. That was a turning point. That's what I mean by weak-minded. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, Tom and I were talking about it earlier. Momentum is definitely a very real thing. You could see if you were watching the broadcast, Travis Etienne just kind of like putting his hands down and obviously being disappointed in himself. I feel for him because I thought he was going to – I mean, I know he's an outstanding player and certainly shouldn't be at any risk of, like, losing his starting job to Tank or anything like that. And I thought he was going to have an outstanding season. And so hopefully he's able to turn that around and kind of be more of like a lightning bolt or like a flash in the pan for the Jaguars offense, because I feel like that's really what he has been the past 2 years, is kind of like give them some juice or give them some explosiveness when they really needed it. And then today was kind of the opposite. And so hopefully he'll kind of get back in the right direction. Reedy said, I felt good to start, but it just kept getting worse. Yep. Duval TV said, he should have had his second touchdown to Brian Thomas, but Jalen Ramsey did pass interference to prevent it, so he could have had 2 touchdowns in his defense. Yeah, no, that's actually true, because on this drive, when Brian Thomas drew the pass interference, the Jaguars just punched it in with Travis Etienne from the 1-yard line a play later. And so Trevor easily could have ended up with 2 touchdowns if Brian Thomas had hauled in that pass that Jalen Ramsey interfered with him with. But at the same time, Trevor underthrew that pass. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, because obviously you see it with CJ Beathard a lot in the past, but you saw on this play too, where an underthrown ball can lead to defensive pass interference a lot. But I mean, I thought Trevor had Brian like right off of the line of scrimmage. Like as soon as a second after the play happened, I was like, okay, you got Brian, throw it to him. And Trevor did kind of just kind of like hold the ball for a little bit too long. So I will say, or just add that caveat too. Jacob says playbook change at halftime, which means Doug pass it on to Press Taylor. Yeah, I don't really have any like strong evidence to say that the playbook did change at halftime, but just kind of based off vibes alone, that's certainly the way it felt. Duval TV said it felt like I was watching a movie that was scripted. That feels like every Jags game and every Jags season, doesn't it? Breedy says, I think Bigsby is better than ETN. No, this is almost as insane as saying Mac Jones is better than Trevor Lawrence. I know that Bigsby just objectively had a better game than ETN did today. Even without ETN's red zone fumble, Bigsby was looking really nice, carrying the ball on the ground. He also had a stiff arm against Jalen Ramsey in the first quarter. That was pretty nice. But, I mean, part of the reason that analytics people say wrongly that running backs don't matter is because so much of running back production performance is based on the environment around them, mostly the blocking by the offensive line. And I thought Bigsby had way more holes and way more room to run than ETN did at any point in the game. And maybe that's just because of the run blocking. Maybe a little bit of that is just that Bigsby had some better play calls kind of given to him. I'm not really sure, but I disagree, Riddy. I think ETN is a far, far better player than Bigsby, even though Bigsby should be commended for having a nice performance today. Duval TV said, felt like I was watching a movie that was scripted earlier, and then he changed it to horror movie. That's funny. Nick said, anyone who blames Trevor for this loss has 0 brain cells. I try to put it a little nicer than that, but yeah, sure. Duval TV says, I blame Travis and Trevor. James Goddard says, Trevor is not the problem. The offensive line didn't block well, and the wide receivers dropped balls. It just didn't look good in the second half. Yeah, I think one of the concerning things for the Jaguars from the preseason is that there was not really anything to give us like hope that the offensive line would be a lot better than it was last season. I know that Mitch Morse is a huge on paper upgrade over Luke Fortner at the pivot, aka at the center position. But Morse was also released by his former team in the offseason by the Bills, and he's 32-ish, definitely more over 30 years old. And so I think it was just kind of assumed that with a Morse upgrade at the center position, and then with just kind of like better cohesiveness, chemistry, play calling, more experience, whatever you want to call it, just that the offensive line would naturally improve. And even though Bigsby definitely had some big holes open up for him, and there was some nice moments in the first half for sure, I think the offensive line is probably the biggest thing to be concerned about right now. Patman said, do you think it's his pocket presence to roll with coverage or step up? Sorry, Patman, I'm not really sure what you mean by that. Reedy said BTJ in the first portion of the game, or had it in the first portion of the game, and then he never had it again after the touchdown. I mean, it's hard to really say that BTJ didn't have it when I don't even know. He might have had one target in the second half. I feel like it was an early, 6-yard gain, and then nothing really happened after that. So, yeah, disappointing for the Jags to go away from Brian Thomas after he was having an impressive first half for a 21-year-old rookie in his first NFL game. James is pissed about the loss. Adam, Minshew going to get Raiders to the playoffs. Already thrown for 100 yards early in the second quarter. If Gardner Minshew leads the Las Vegas Raiders to the playoffs, I will eat a Minshew jersey on live stream. Victor says, sorry, we'll get him next week. Apology accepted, Victor. Thank you for saying that. Dejan says, Jags had him on the ropes, kept throwing the jab when the shoulder should have hit him with the uppercut. ETN fumble, SMH. I appreciate the cross-sport analogy. Yeah, they kind of did just kind of kept hitting me with the jab and then should have really hit him for the big play. I felt like they were trying to do that in the first half. Like they kept establishing the run a little bit, getting Bigsby going, and then they had that pass to Brian Thomas where he was interfered with in the end zone, and that set up a 1st and 1 on the goal line for ETN to punch it in. But yeah, that didn't really happen as much in the second half where there was just no haymakers thrown at all by the Jags. T Rash can't read defenses. I haven't seen the T Rash nickname before. That's actually pretty funny. 55 million and 162 yards passing. I mean, since he was drafted, I've been trying to tell people worry more about the process than the results. I know that the results today were no bueno, to put it lightly, but to me, I can't really think of anything in Trevor Lawrence's process that stuck out as bad. Frank says they schemed up no plays in the second half for BTJ, who seemed unstoppable. Yeah, I would have liked to see. I mean, I know that there was the Ramsey PI play, but other than that, Brian had like an 18-yard completion on like a deep button hook that was kind of like a cover 3 beater, but like there was no sideline shots or just any like true deep vertical shots for Brian, and so it would have been nice to see Trevor at least, or not this Trevor because he's not calling plays, but for the Jags as a whole to have tried to get a shot to Brian at some point in the second half. Brad says Jags offense sucks. Michael says Jags got confident and thought they had the win. Didn't we all? Tom said this was last season summed up in one game. Yeah, good one, Tom. That's pretty good. Had us in the first half, huh? Nick said, I don't know. It feels more like a fumble inside the 5 and 4 third down play calling cost us the game far more than a single third and out. Yeah, I mean, definitely like the play of the game for better or for worse, and this time for worse was the Travis Etienne red zone fumble. But yeah, the play calling, it was a little bit weird how like Engram didn't get super involved like at all, and even Brenton Strange, I was like kind of expecting just like some screens at him to mix it up at some point. But yeah, and it seemed like they were running a lot of like 12 personnel too at the beginning of the game. I didn't really notice in the second half what they were doing, but I felt like they were doing like pretty heavy personnel packages for most of the game. So then for like your tight ends to barely be targeted on top of that is a little bit perplexing. Frank agrees with me. Trevor's definitely not the problem. They literally took the game out of his hands. Duval TV said, do you know what Patrick Mahomes does with the ball in his hand with 3 timeouts and that much time left in the game on the line? Okay, but he also has multiple Pro Bowlers on the offensive line. Maybe the greatest head coach of his generation in Andy Reid. And also Patrick Mahomes is the best, I was going to say athlete, but a football player I've ever seen. LeBron's still better, but yeah. It's Patrick Mahomes. Come on. Nick says that's the problem with most fans, continuously comparing quarterbacks and coaching to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. I think this goes the other way too. Like, why are we comparing Trevor Lawrence to Daniel Jones and Gardner Minshew? Anyone who like watches the game, like you don't even have to be a ball knower. Just watch the freaking TV screen in front of you, and you can see the huge talent disparity. It's not even just talent too; it's everything. Reedy asked, what happened to Tyson Campbell? Please tell me this is not a repeat of last year. Got bad news for you, Reedy. Unfortunately, it seemed like he aggravated his hamstring during this game. And I'm not sure which hamstring like he aggravated in today's game and which hamstring he had aggravated last season. But, I mean, Campbell seemed pretty disappointed on the sideline. He kind of like had his helmet in his hands. And yeah, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Tyson Campbell is held out next week just to try to be safe and to try to make sure Tyson is going to be good for the majority of the season and isn't just battling with another hamstring injury for the whole year. Duval TV says, you need to start holding Trevor responsible just like everybody else. Never. Let's see what else we got. All right, Robert asked, how do you think Ryan's defense did after his first game? I mean, obviously a tale of two halves, right? But I think just in a vacuum, holding Miami to 20 points in their home opener, like week 1 and they're at home, is pretty impressive. A-Chain had that screen on, I think it was the first drive or maybe the second drive that went for about 38 yards. But other than that, I mean, I feel like the nothing cheap, nothing deep philosophy for Nielsen worked for the most part until McDaniel was able to make some adjustments and get that high-low concept that Tommy was talking about earlier to Waddle, and then obviously the Tyreek Hill 80-yard touchdown. So I was encouraged by Ryan's defense, even if it did fall off in the second half. The run defense especially seemed to fall off. Like I think they averaged about 0.5 yards per carry allowed in the first half, and then I don't know what it was in the second half, but it was definitely a lot more than that. And so, yeah, as long as they can just play a full 4 quarters, then they'll be better. But I think I was encouraged by the start, even if the end of the game wasn't great. But I will say, did anyone else think Cisco looked a little big or slow or something. I don't know. Like he was like I thought he was in great shape. He certainly came back last offseason in amazing shape, but he just didn't really look like the same player to me today. Jason said, "Did Engram even play today?" Sure didn't feel like it, did it? And why wasn't Thomas Jr. targeted? It's hard to say. I mean, it's very possible that Thomas Jr., like after having a good first half, the Dolphins kind of adjusted their defense and maybe not like bracketed him every play because it's actually rare for teams to double team opposing wide receivers pretty often, unless you're like Justin Jefferson or Devontae Adams in his prime or something like that. And so maybe it was a defensive adjustment by the Dolphins. I think that's probably a fair assumption, but yeah, again, like a lot of these questions, a little bit tough to tell without having seen the all 22. Jared said Buster played well. I think that's fair. I mean, he did allow a second or third down conversion to Jalen Waddle over the middle on a slant at some point in the second half, but as far as I know, that was the only time I really remember seeing him on the screen. And so, yeah, it's not like Buster came in and immediately gave up a 50-yard play. And so Buster was, I think, a pleasant surprise last season in terms of how he did playing in relief of Tyson Campbell with an injury. And I think that was kind of the same story yesterday, where even if he did let up that Waddle catch, pleasant surprise that he didn't really do anything crazy. Adam said only thing positive from today was a Titans collapse to the Bears. That is very much positive. Robert added the Colts also lost. So, hey, I'm pretty sure the Texans did beat the Colts. Yeah, well, the Colts played the Texans. Okay. So the Texans are going to be 1-0 and in the lead in the AFC South through 1 week. But I guess good news for the Jags is that they're tied for 0-1 with the other two teams, the Titans and the Colts. And so we got a long season, folks. Reedy said that fourth down play when Travis ran all the way around for no gain was so bad to watch. Yep. James says the game was all lost by the O-line. ETN fumble on 4th and 1 call, dropped passes, yada, yada. We need O-line makeover. Yeah, I called it on one of the last Jaguars on SI podcast, but I think – or I know Shipley has said this too, but like offensive tackle round 1 and then a guard in round 2, that might be what we're looking at right now, especially after Tyson got extended before the season, because before Tyson was extended, I probably would have said corner is the team's biggest need, but right now it certainly looks like offensive line. Reedy said, think of the loss in a positive way. Only half the NFL wins and half loses. Thanks for the positiveness, Reedy. George followed up with that. We gonna lose next week. James said Cisco looked hurt and pulling up. Yeah, maybe he got hurt or something. Maybe like he also pulled a hammy or something. I don't know. Jared said Ventrell Miller has impressed me with his tenacity. Looks great on special teams today. I agree with that. I think Ventrell had some flashes on defense too, not just special teams. So I think that was one of kind of the few positive takeaways from the Jaguars today was just that Ventrell looked nice in his action. He played a little bit more than I was expecting, but he's like Parker Washington, another guy that's had a great offseason, especially after being pretty quiet last offseason as a rookie. Okay. Well, we didn't hit every single comment, but we hit pretty much all of them. We've gone over an hour now, and so I think I'm just going to wrap up now. But the fifth quarter starts on 1010XL channels and on a 92.5 FM in about 45 minutes. So make sure you tune in then to hear Ryan Hacker Green, Coach Dave Campo, and Leon Searcy break down their thoughts from Jaguars Dolphins. Thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. Reedy, I'll see ya. Really appreciate you all. Hopefully this was a good therapy session. Look out for me. You can follow me on @Gus_Logue on Twitter, and I'll let you know after watching the game tape whether we should be upset at Trevor Lawrence for not having a fourth quarter game-winning drive. But yeah, until next time, we'll be back here on Tuesday, I believe at noon, but it might be 9:04 a.m. We're trying to work out exactly what the best start time is. But the next episode of Duval Rundown will be at some point on Tuesday. We are now also sponsored by Injury Care Centers. So thank you to them for sponsoring. And yeah, that's it. Thanks again, everyone. Peace out.